Call Lewiston City Council to order. If you please stand and join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
one nation, under God, indivisible.
Thank you all. Ask Tanya to take a silent roll call and note that Councilor Forsman is joining us via Zoom today. Next order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, the Pledge of Allegiance, the citizen comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the council on agenda items or other items they wish to bring to the attention of the council. Also, as a reminder, City Council pledges to practice and promote civility within the governing body, respecting others and their viewpoints and finding solutions for the betterment of the city of Lewiston. With that, are there any citizen comments today? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to our active agenda, Roman numeral 4. First up is Resolution 2023-7 concerning approving revised City of Lewiston personnel policy. Nikki Province, our director, is here. HR, Nikki, will you please introduce yourself for the record and remember to speak up loudly and clearly so that those listening at home can hear what you have to say. Thank you. Welcome.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. Nikki Province, HR Director for the city. I'm bringing to you a revised personnel policy. There weren't a lot of additions or changes. These are just more grammatical, spacing, some revisions to some of the sections. On the agenda item history sheet, I did write down the sections that were what I felt had some substantive changes to them so that you could see what specifically was changed. And otherwise, I'll just hold for questions if you had any.
Oh, thank you.
Councilor Schroeder.
Thank you. Ms. Provence, I sat in on the negotiations.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if I didn't see any red flags, but does this need to go back to them for their approval?
Yeah, so the police and the technicians' collective bargaining agreement both say that they'll be provided a copy prior to approval of any changes. So I have provided copies prior to this meeting to those two unions, and then fire does not refer back to the personnel policy. So if the unions did have some concerns that they wanted to bring up, they could do that later in negotiations. I haven't heard from them as having any concerns with the changes.
And follow up?
Councilor.
I thought you did a very good job of catching some, of course, the grammar and spelling and whatnot, but also clarifying where they're, at first blush, it didn't seem like that needed to be, but then reading through there, that was good that you caught a lot of that, did it?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's good practice to come before you guys maybe every year with any kind of changes if we have any. Obviously, you learn from the year, you know, what worked or didn't work or where we need to tweak things to have it be clearer, more understanding. So that's kind of what we've tried to do in this case. Yeah.
Councilor Lidke.
It's not necessarily pertaining to the changes, but just a historical question. Can you tell me why the prior council went from at will to for cause?
We have always been for cause. The council, when we brought up the personnel policy in 2022, there was the question of whether we wanted to go to at-will, and we initially wrote it as an at-will, so we changed it from for cause to at-will. That council did not agree to the change, and so we kept it for cause. And so we didn't attempt to make that change this year.
Councilor Forsman, you have any questions?
No, I actually watched those meetings when they discussed changing that extensively. So I agree with the previous council's decision on that one. So I don't have any further questions at the moment.
Councilor Towsley, but he's not connected to audio for some reason.
So I guess what I'm asking from you guys today is approval of the changes to the personnel policy.
Thank you,
I
Director.
did, some of that cut out, so I did miss if there was anything discussed in the past 5 minutes. I did miss some stuff.
Well, there was a question of for cause versus at will. We were.
Okay, I got that
Yeah,
part.
okay. And then there was the question of the unions being notified of the changes, and they were notified prior to this meeting, and they knew that I would be coming up here on this meeting.
Okay, thank you. That part I didn't hear.
And Tanya, would you please note that Counselor Towsley has joined us too? Oh, there he is. Counselor, do you have
Are you
any
able to
questions?
hear me?
Do you have any questions before we entertain a motion?
I'm not sure if I'm able to be heard. I can hear you now.
Yes, we can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Counselors, the item is before you. Resolution is before you for consideration. Counselor Schroeder?
I'm certainly in favor of it. I think it's, did a great job, and it was very interesting to sit through the process, and I support this.
Second. Is there a motion? I need a motion.
I move that, sorry, I wasn't sure how, if we had to make a motion or just
Yeah.
say we wanted to. Okay. I move that we approve the personnel policy as edited, amended, sorry, thank you.
Second. Okay, it's been moved by Counselor Schroeder, second by Counselor Kleberg to approve Resolution 2023-7, the revised City of Lewiston personnel policy. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I,
Well, I think it's roll call, Mr. Mayor.
It is a roll call, you're right. We got to redo that, folks. I got ahead of myself. Clerk Brockey?
All right, Council President Lidkey.
Aye.
Councilor Kleberg.
Aye.
Councilor Schroeder.
Aye.
Councilor Spickelmeyer.
Aye.
Councilor Forsman.
I,
Councilor Towsley.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, councilors. Next up, we move to Roman numeral 5, work session items. Please note that identifying an item as an action item does not require the city council to vote on that item. First up, item A is emergency management, update provided by Emergency Management Director Mark Hurd. Mark, welcome. If you please stand by the podium, introduce yourself, and remember to speak loudly and clearly. There's a microphone above your head, and folks should be able to hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, City Council, for having me. I was asked to do today is brief you on the role of the emergency manager as it pertains to Lewiston County. My position is a little unique because it's staffed both as the emergency manager for the city and for the county of Nez Perce. So with that,
For the record, I need you to introduce yourself.
Mark Hurd, Nez Perce County and the city of Lewiston emergency manager.
Thank you.
So to begin with, the position of emergency manager is often misunderstood. I get phone calls throughout the day asking about very specific emergency programs that are related to EMS or fire, etc. As emergency manager, my roles and responsibilities are primarily with plans. So we do a lot of we help build and architect and monitor the evacuation plans, the all hazard mitigation plans, emergency operations plans. So most of that stuff is done behind the scenes, coordinating between fire, medical, PD, the sheriff's department, et cetera. So all of the emergency response services come together. One of the things that is important is training. So I capture a lot of the training responsibilities or requirements, and that is to go out and get resources for training, find government grants for training, et cetera. The ICS which is the Incident Command System, is the emergency manager's bread and butter. So what I do in that position is I make sure that the incident command training is available, and that we have the right folks taking those training courses so that they can become certified or remain certified, so that when an incident does happen, we're following that structure according to what the federal government and state government see fit, so that we fall in line with all the other resources. Also, that pertains to exercises. I help coordinate a lot of the exercises for emergency response for the county and the city. For example, we're starting to build a potential exercise at the college for the fall semester, hopefully. That's going to take a lot of building and working with our joint partners and a collaboration to get that to go, but that's my responsibility to bring those opportunities to the organizations as well as the public. Grants is a big part of the emergency manager's job. For programs that are that require additional assistance and funding, I go out and help procure those grants or keep the grants that we have. And then declarations. So as we just saw recently with the incident that we had here in Lewiston, there was a declaration created. So part of the emergency manager's role is to look at the current situation, help give advice on whether that fits the requirements for a declaration, whether it needs to get pushed up to the state. Behind the scenes work on trying to make sure that the right folks are notified so that goes through seamlessly. And then response. So hopefully we don't get to this point, but in situations of responses to natural disasters or man-made disasters, at the Emergency Operations Center, and typically is the director, and helps make sure that all of the agencies that are responding are identified, represented, and staffed appropriately so that leaders are making decisions that are based off of the information that the subject matter experts are delivering to them. And then recovery falls right back into the grants process, again, going after federal assistance, state assistance, et cetera. And then the best way to capture emergency manager is they're a liaison, right? So my position is to help liaise between different organizations so that we make sure we have all the available resources that we need to respond or prepare or mitigate any disasters. I just recently came back from a conference down in Boise, where the state of Idaho emergency managers for all the county and regional managers were there, and we went over some of the current hazards that are starting to show themselves, or the things that we would need to focus on. And when that happens, we come back and we kind of take a good look at the emergency operations plans that we've developed, make sure we're still hitting the mark, and look for any recommendations or changes, as well as implementing those into future current exercises that we may be planning for community preparedness. With that being said, that's essentially what my role is in the city. That's just the major touch points. There's a lot of behind the scenes things that go on with documentation, paperwork, et cetera. Is there any questions or anything anybody would like to know?
Councilor Kleberg.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for the presentation. What I'm concerned about is when we had the failure at the reservoir, that the city's response was very late in getting out, alerting people about the boil water order, or even to alert people that they got a disaster coming their way. And believe me, I've been contacted by a lot of people that live down in the Sunset area. I guess I'm just curious, who's responsible for putting an alert out? I mean, they have an Amber Alert for some place in Spokane, and it's blowing up everybody's phone. I'm just wondering, how does that work with the city of Lewiston to let people know that we got something bad going on?
Thank you for the opportunity to address that. So that will derive out of both the emergency manager office as well as working through dispatch. So with this incident, it was a little unique because there's a gray area on getting people to move quickly and utilizing some of those emergency broadcast systems to do that. With this, as we were getting information, the immediate threat had reduced very rapidly. Once the water was done, the notification for getting people to move or to save lives at that point was past that point of getting those notifications out. However, the advisory moving forward, that is an area that after I evaluated or was given information as brand new to this position, there are advisory, I can use those notifications for advisory. So moving forward, absolutely, the public will be notified for situations such as the boil advisory for any future events that go on. And there's different ways of doing that. We have the alert sense system that I now have access to, that we can push out messages to. That requires folks to go in and register. So I was contacted by Clue and gave information out as well. In summary, exactly what we're talking about, and encouraging folks to sign up for that alert sense. And then there's some other systems that we can utilize that tap into the same programs as the Amber Alerts, et cetera. And we can use areas based on the zone that they can run for any area within a grid, and they can activate cell phones and landlines, et cetera, to send out a message. So that is an area that I, as a brand new emergency manager, didn't have the right knowledge of when these boil alerts were going out. So we utilized the media, we utilized press releases, et cetera, social media. But moving forward, that will be utilized for any future event.
Councilor Schroeder?
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Do you have access to grants or funding or anything to help with this catastrophe that happened here to the public and to our city? So do you have access to that, or is that part of your job?
So that is a very complicated answer. So the issue with what happened in the city as it pertains to the Idaho Office of Emergency Management and the state grants and federal grants that come down, the key for much of that relief is disaster as it is defined as a natural or man-made incident, as in a terrorist attack or domestic terrorism. So the information that I've received from IOEM is we did declare an emergency. We've requested ways to try to find avenues for getting funding through that route. And as of today, we do not have anything that meets those definitions to get money in grants for recovery because they do not meet the natural disaster or terrorist definitions that the FEMA and the IOEM have put out.
Councilor Lidke?
Can you tell me what the acronym IOAM is?
Idaho Office of Emergency Management.
Councilor Kleberg?
Yeah, just one final comment. I guess the point that a lot of people that were calling me brought up was they weren't even notified until the early afternoon or even mid-afternoon that there was a boil water alert. And that was a big, problem and concern. People getting up in the morning and, making their coffee and, whatever. And they had no clue that their water system might have been compromised. I mean, I guess that's what I'm getting at. That alert probably should have been going out no later than 4:45 when I think it's the time of the rupture was, shortly after 4 a.m. So there's got to be a way that we can put the notice out to people, like now, that's saying, hey, we had a problem, boil your water till you're further notified. And that should happen early in the morning.
Agreed. And those, that the notification systems that are available will be utilized.
Counselor Forsman or Counselor Towsley, I don't see either one of you.
Mr. Mayor.
Counselor?
So if I'm understanding correctly, what we're saying is this might be a system that works similar to an Amber Alert so that they can be notified much faster, kind of learning from this incident that has recently happened.
Mr. Hurd?
Yes, that's correct. The communication systems for immediate notifications such as Amber Alerts, extreme disasters, et cetera, there's a fine line on when we use them because you don't want to get accustomed to the Amber Alert that you're getting 3 states away and develop that I'm just going to ignore a message that went out. So as emergency managers, we're trying to be cautious of what we send out. And this was not necessarily the right time to be cautious, but it is important to identify when to use those systems. And so this was a learning lesson that this is an opportunity that this could have been utilized to use those systems.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, similar comments from citizens have been that weren't notified fast enough, or they didn't realize until afterwards, and just also miscommunication of whether they can wash their hands or if it was just they can't drink it. So I think it's good that we're learning from this and finding a better way to handle this in the future.
Counselor Lidke, then Counselor Spickelmeyer. Counselor Lidke?
I guess my question is, when did you know that the DEQ was going to determine that our situation required a boil order?
That would have been at when we stood up the incident command system or center. So I honestly, I couldn't tell you what time it was. I know that when I got the phone call and started heading in, the information that I had received is, as an EM, I was focused on, do we have folks that are in immediate danger that we need to evacuate? Are we going to be doing search and rescue missions, et cetera? So there was not a lot of information available at that time. So it was just trying to get in to see if we had an incident command center system already set up, which we did, and just fitting into that at that time.
Counselor Lidke?
So there's a process of hierarchy of need to get that information within the team, right? So maybe water safety in a home a mile and a half away probably wasn't the team's first priority. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is correct. I mean, we have to focus on life support first, evacuations, et cetera. So that doesn't mean that that's not an important message to get out. It's just as the situation's evolving and you're trying to figure out exactly what's going on and get folks out of harm's way. That was the priority at the time.
Counselor Spickelmeyer?
Thank you, Mayor. Mark, could you repeat the areas that you cover, manage, if you will?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So planning, so the incident, our emergency operations plans, there's a whole bunch of them, all the way down to how we respond to reintegrating families with the schools if there's a disaster. The all hazards mitigation, which is identifying potential threats and hazards such as areas like wildfire areas, right? So if there's a particular area that we can do a mitigation project in for a new fire line or fire barrier to keep a residential area protected or improve the effectiveness of a potential fight against a wildfire in that area. Those plans are part of what the emergency manager manages, helps write, helps bring in the joint partners that are experts in individual field, like the sheriff's department or the police department chief or the fire chief, to make sure that the priorities are aligned correctly according to those incident or those subject matter experts. And then training. So I go after training for the departments as it specifically pertains to incident command system. There's a whole bunch of trainings out there that could be a active shooter training to a flood response training course, to talking to the media during disasters. There's a whole slew of opportunities out there. I help communicate that information out to all of our departments so that they can participate in the training or help procure money to get them to those trainings. And then exercises, so practicing those plans to make sure that they actually work. And then lessons learned, a big, we essentially had this incident that happened, taking the not getting a proper communication out through the alert sense and the other notification systems, and making sure that's really integrated into our communications plan, and then following through with that. So identifying lessons learned during exercise and real world issues, and then response and recovery, standing up and making sure that an incident command system is in place and functioning properly, and we have the right people in the right places, and then advising the leadership team, whichever level that may be, because again, I work for the county and the city, so advising the mayor or the city or the county commissioners on this is what a typical response looks like for a flood, or we're on the right track, or we recommend this or that. That's a big part of the emergency manager as well.
Councilor Spickler.
So with that, like the fire department has some emergency response equipment, are you associated with them and that as well, or no?
No, if they needed additional funding for things that may pertain to federal grants that are out there, such as recently in the last couple of years, ballistic vests and helmets were procured for some of the fire department, and that falls in line with responding to active shooters and domestic terrorism, right? So one of the priorities in emergency management grants right now is active shooters and domestic terrorism. So they were able to go after additional grant money to get some of that equipment that they needed that maybe doesn't fall inside the normal budget for the city.
Very good, thank you.
Councilors, Mark, thank you for being here today. I know we can reach you. You're always available, and we appreciate all that you're doing for us. And I'll probably follow up with you a little bit after this meeting tonight or tomorrow to talk about next steps. So,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Councilors, next up we have under Roman numeral 5, item B, consolidated dispatch, discussion regarding a consolidated dispatch. We have with us here 3 individuals. Chief Michaelbus, you're going to kick us off, and then we'll have Chief Cusick here, and I don't see anyone from Mission Critical Partners. No, yeah, so maybe we'll just go with that. But Chief Michaelbus, welcome. If you please introduce yourself for the record, and remember to speak up loudly and clearly. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Absolutely. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Travis Michaelbus, Fire Chief. What I'm going to do is kind of give a recap of where we've been, because I'm one of the few players that's left that's been through that. This actually process started well over 4 years ago when at the time Police Chief Hurd, Sheriff Rodriguez, and myself came together as we looked at dispatch, and it was discussed about looking at having a study done to see what the possibility of consolidated dispatch, and not just for the LC Valley, but there's many other entities that have expressed interest. Our partners across the river, we have others in other counties. And so that started, like I said, 4 years ago. Things kind of went on hold when we were battling through the pandemic. It definitely kind of took a lot of our focus. As the pandemic started to slow down, we had a change in the sheriff's office. And so we met once again, Chief Hurd, myself, and Sheriff Scrimshire, and we discussed, is this still something to go forward with? And basically there was the city and the county policymakers agreed to put the funding aside to have a consultant come in and look and decide and provide kind of an overall plan. And whether the group decides to go with that, it really creates a plan. So that's kind of the background and the history of going through this. There were many stakeholder meetings. The study has been put together. It has been delivered to the group. It has not formally been presented to City Council nor the county commissioners. I'm sure that may be something at a later date and time. Now changes, now we have, Chief Hurd has retired. We now have Chief Kuzik who is here. And what he's going to do is talk about looking at this and kind of his vision, some of the questions he may have related to it. And once again, we're going to have another change in 4 months when I retire, and you'll have now a new fire chief. And so that will throw, once again, a whole nother change into this. So as we've seen it, we've also had a change in the form of government. And so there's been a lot as we've gone through this. So really it's just kind of bring everybody up to date where we are. And then when Chief Kuzik's done, I want to briefly discuss a couple things related to breaking out the cost of dispatch that the fire department utilizes so that we can access and leverage those in our cost reporting when we come into the ground emergency medical transport supplemental payment program. Meaning, let's not leave money on the table that could take a burden off of our taxpayers. So I want to brief the council with that at the end. With that, Chief, I'm going to leave it up to you.
Chief Kuzik, welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record and remember to speak up loudly and clearly. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Jason Kuzik, Chief of Police. As Chief Michael said, there is a proposal that was completed. It hasn't been shared yet, but at the end of this meeting or any point, I will happily share it. It's probably a good idea for all of council to get a full review. What I'm going to go over is page 1 of the handouts I've given everyone. And Councilman Online, I emailed each of you, so you should have a copy of it in your inbox if you want to take a check for that. I'm going to kind of go through these. This came directly from the proposal. So these are just the very overall highlights of the outcomes that would be expected if the consolidated dispatch center is completed. These are basically the pretty much what can be expected, the positive points of the project. So if you're comfortable, I'll go through it all, or if you want to just read it, but I can just kind of go through each bullet point, and then the second 2 pages are just kind of my position points. So overall, there's operations, government management, facilities, technology, costs, and human resources are how this is kind of broken out over. So for operations, the plan would improve situational awareness, reduce call transfers, improves field responder safety, coordination between agencies, facilitate interagency communication and coordination, improve consistency in PSAPs, service performance standards, improve the workforce staffing and reduce risks, improve response outcomes by reducing call transfers, provide opportunity to cross-train all communications officers in the county to answer calls and dispatch for any other disciplines and also the whole geographic region. Improve service delivery to field responders and citizens, reduce non-dispatch related tasks, and streamline the focus on emergency communications. For government, and then under government and management, it would establish a neutral, independent authority over the joint PSAP, which stands for Public Safety Answering Point. It would also establish cost sharing between, it has 2 agencies here, but that would be the baseline. If more were to be added, then it would be spread out. For the facility, it would construct a multi-purpose facility that can support current and future growth. Under technology, it'll leverage existing technology to support the consolidated operation. It would start leveraging next-gen 911 and any other emergency technologies. It'll enhance the capabilities of the existing CAD system under the management authority of the consolidated PSAP, expand capabilities using the AVTEC console system, improve radio interoperability and backup capabilities, and improve continuity of operations. As far as costs go, it would improve regional cost savings through improved economy of scale and leveraging cost-sharing opportunities, reduce duplicative costs, eliminate costly multiple operating environments, leverages a consolidated workforce to meet the staffing of a 24/7 system. And under human resources, it improves retention and eliminates recruiting competition by aligning salaries and benefits. It creates additional career advancement and work-life balance opportunities. and enhances operations and reduces liability exposure by increasing minimum staffing. So that's what the plan is breaking out. I believe is what they would consider the positives of having a consolidated center. I've reviewed the proposal. I've read it 2 different times, given a lot of consultation myself, thinking about it, reading it, and also going over with my staff and going through it. But based on that, and especially with the change of leadership talked about, I do not support this consolidated plan. I don't think it is in the best interest of the city of Lewiston or Lewiston Police Department. The past 2 pages are my talking points, why I've come to this conclusion. Right now, Lewiston's annual call volume is 164,031. The county is 7,013. And the figures in here all come out of the plan. So I'm not making anything up or coming from other sources. I am using the plan's own numbers. Now, where that numbers came from, that includes non-emergency, administrative, and 911 costs. So obviously, Lewiston PD has the vast majority of calls, but under the bullet point where it talks about having a consolidated management system, we would have 1 out of 5 votes, even though pretty much our dispatch center today in our police department covers about 85% of all incoming calls to a dispatch center. The other dispatchers coming in, because we're also talking about merging multiple dispatch centers, we're talking about dispatchers from other jurisdictions. We'd have to also take into consideration that their call volume and their work volume is going to increase about a 14 to 15-fold based on what they're doing right now. Because right now, our dispatchers are handling almost 165,000 calls. The county is 7,000. Another possibility that one of the agencies is also the Tribe Police Department, which obviously doesn't handle anywhere near the volume we do as well. So the transfers out, that probably would occur. There would be a reduction, but even running the numbers through our dispatch, basically since July of 2022, we only average about 3 to 5 misrouted calls a month. So from July to today's date, at best, we've had 35 misrouted calls. So it's not like that's a high volume and it wouldn't really reduce enough. And right now, to date, talking with the dispatch team, nobody can remember where there's been an unfortunate or some kind of tragic ending related to a call that got delayed 15 seconds potentially and had to get routed to a new dispatch center. With that, if this were to occur, the police department, I'd have to ask for 1, maybe 2 more records personnel because of loss of dispatch assistance. Right now, our dispatchers supplement our records department. They process all the patrol paperwork for courts, driver's licensing, and also any paperwork going to the prosecutor office. The cost and location right now is currently unknown. Per the study, they're anticipating a cost of between $600 and $800 a square foot, and they're calling for a building of about 5,500 square feet. So even on the low end, at $650 a square foot, that's going to be a $3.575 million building. That's just the structure. And where realistic funding would come from, that would have to be determined as well. Another point is who would handle all the HR and finance. It looks like they would probably fall back to the Lewiston finance and HR departments to handle that for this new center. But with that, we'd have to almost reinvent the wheel. We'd have to discuss how we'd handle pay, scheduling, collective bargaining, training, the seniority of the merging of the 2 centers, policy, procedures, development, as well as discipline. Also, the question I would have to answer, would they ultimately end up being city or county employees? Right now, with that, we have 11 dispatchers, but 2 of those are in training. Everything's tracking very well with them, but until they actually complete training, there's no guarantee that they're going to be sitting in a console alone right now. So right now we have 11, but technically 9 are full-time trained in solo dispatchers. We're authorized for 15, so that's how low we are right now. County has 6 employees with the last conversation I had with the sheriff. The plan, though, calls for 30 to be fully staffed. Our training cycle right now, which really is best in class, is 30 weeks. Would probably likely increase because of the cross-training. All the dispatchers would have to know all the other agencies and all the increased geography. One of the issues talked about is the turnover rate. The plan itself said there would be an approximate loss of 25 employees, 25% employee loss rate if the plan were to go into effect. So based on the numbers I just gave you, you can see where that would go. And then we'd have to turn around and still try to rehire up to 30. That caused a reduction in turnover. We did some basic cost comparison. Right now, Whitcomb, their starting pay is $28.33, and they are struggling to get qualified employees. Though the plan talks about how all this best-in-class pay and benefits and location, would increase our staffing. So I think it's gonna be a little challenging for that to bear fruit. Right now, we top out at $26.76. That's a typo on my part in your notes. So our top out is actually less than the Whitcomb Dispatch Center. Funding is not equal, and the higher burden will shift to Lewiston. The approximate yearly salary and benefit cost is basically $2.3 million. Right now, our approximate salaries and benefits is $1.12 million for the entire dispatch center. If we go with the consolidated model with just Lewiston and county, our salary and benefit contribution would have to increase to $1.789 million. If we bring in Moscow and the tribe, then it would go down to $1.23 million. And lastly, one of the other points, the morale within dispatch would suffer greatly. Talking to all the dispatchers and several officers, actually a lot of officers in the department, there's absolutely zero support with this in-house for this consolidated center. We also reached out to Whitcomb and talked to them. What you have there is the pros and cons. This is from their dispatch manager. So of a consolidated dispatch center, you would have a larger geographic area connected, granted. It would be easy to broadcast updates and big incidents because everybody's in one room. Everything and everyone is in one room, so less calling other agencies for questions, comments, and information, and everyone has Spillman. I put those bullet points there. I'll get back to that in a minute, circle back to Spillman. When staffing allows, dispatchers can focus on one dispatcher on a high-stress call or incident. Meaning if there's a critical incident, you can dedicate one full-time employee to that. Agencies can share costs and equipment. All dispatchers are cross-trained for all areas, knowing what is going on in the immediate region, and having an administrative relationship with all other areas. Now, the cons she listed was staffing and staying fully staffed, which I talked about earlier. Dispatchers have a huge geographical area to learn, and especially it'll be areas that each dispatcher doesn't know the others. Training right now is about 6 to 7 months because there's so much that dispatchers have to know. Currently, our training cycle is 30 weeks, so that we're falling actually in line with that. But the other dispatchers from county, I don't think have anywhere near that kind of training time, so they'll have to come up to that level. When the technology fails, it can affect many agencies, meaning if we're all in one building, all these agencies, if something fails, it fails for everybody, not just us. We couldn't rely on county or we couldn't reach out to other agencies for assistance. The agencies have their own policies and also their needs and desires. So they have policies and basically up there, they say everybody ultimately has to kind of follow the Whitcomb way, as they said. They have a law, records, and fire EMS committees so that everybody can stay on the same page. So it'd be hard for dispatchers to remember every agency's little nuances all the time. From the Whitcomb Finance Officer, establishing doable user fees for all agencies. And what she means by that is hosting agencies receives money from the state. Since agency is now going to have to pay a user fee, they have to be okay with whatever the user fee is and whatever model is determined by that finance committee. And they shouldn't have to ask for a lower fee since the agency is hosting them. I also reached out to one of the police leaders up in Kootenai County that is operating under that, and he could not have been more emphatic advising me to stay away from a consolidated model. One example he gave is that he wanted to change one radio protocol, and because of the way the system is structured, it took him 2 years to get that pushed through the system, and finally for them to all agree that they could make that change. I'm like, I've had to be sure 2 years? He goes, yes, 2 years. So basically, what does it come down to? At the end of the day, even if the costs were mitigated and everything was zero, it still, I think, is zero sum for Lewiston PD to join a consolidated program. Ultimately, what it comes down is really we will lose control of our dispatch center. It's going to be replaced by a bureaucracy. And what I mean by that is just kind of like I explained with Kootenai County, but also any changes or update right now can be made with a phone call or an email in-house. It'll move to a bureaucracy. So it'll ultimately move to an agenda item. We just can't right now. If Chief Michaelbus has a question, he can just call me or call Communication Manager Brown, and something can be changed and fixed immediately. Now it'll have to go on an agenda. So there's no flexibility to make any changes or implement any protocols that are just for LPD or the Lewiston Fire Department. Like I said, we must work for all agencies, or there's an added burden, and that creates an added burden on the dispatcher, like I talked before from up in Whitcomb. They have to know everything. So that is a lot to know for dispatchers in that kind of high-stress environment. And going back to Spillman, I'm not that big of a fan of Spillman as our computer-aided dispatch system. I could live with it, but if we go into a consolidated model, if at any point in the future, I feel it's better for Lewiston to move away to something like New World or Premier One, it won't happen, because that means every agency involved in the consolidated center would have to agree to that change as well. So once we land on a CAD, we are stuck with it pretty much forever. So right now, I just think, if there's even an appetite for consolidated center, I think it's just it might be a little too narrow for the long term for this community's needs moving forward, so. With that, I'm happy to answer questions. I brought Captain Clone and Communication Manager Brown along with me if there's any historical or technical questions that are involved. So I know it's kind of long-winded, but just want to make sure all the points were brought out. And again, ultimately, if the appetite on council is to move forward with this, I'm not going to be an obstructionist. I'm not going to push back. I will absolutely abide by your wishes, and I will help shepherd this process along in my capacity as well, if that's ultimately going to be the decision, so.
Thank you, Chief. Counselor Spiegelmeier?
Mr. Mayor. So Chief, currently, like if you had your system crash, is there something in place that would reroute control over to the county or something?
What we do right now have a backup system that works for us. That's at the training center. So we could go over there and then is it two consoles over there?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have two consoles that we could then start dispatching from there in an emergency.
Your current telecommunications room's pretty poor from my walkthrough, so it needs updated or
Correct,
changed.
as well as the server room too. That, yeah, we have fire. I think fire is backed up by boat batteries. Yeah, so it's, yeah.
Counselor Ledke?
Not necessarily a question, but a comment. I serve on that Joint Powers Board, and first of all, it would be nice if that plan was somewhere where folks could review it. I don't know that I've gotten a full copy. I've gotten pieces of it. I've had the mission command documents, but some of the concerns that I've had from the get-go of learning that is the amount of staff that we have, which approved for 15. So here's a question. How many per shift are staffed?
Well, we're running 12s right now, so we basically have like a day and a night shift. So if we were, probably might be a great question for Lori Brown.
Most of the time, we have 2 people working. There are times that we have 3 people working. 3 is ideal, 2, especially with 12-hour shifts. They can't leave, can't take breaks.
So to lead into my concern, which has been that our call volume is essentially over 18 and a half calls per hour per day, based on that number that you gave. So we're already, I think, in a place where we need to talk about supporting that particular division. And then to look at taking on more call volume, that wasn't necessarily my concern, but the overall geographic area, yes. But I'm also very concerned about backup systems and the fact that, we've, I think Chief Michaelbus mentioned that this has been going on for 4 years, but I feel like previous attempts have been made to try to consolidate. And the concern that I keep coming back to is that all those costs, and then when we look at the things that, the deferred maintenance, the upgrades that are needed in the city of Lewiston, and then the cost comes at us, and we know the value of staff, but now for us, I think the decision of this council is, what do we put first, equipment or staff? And I don't know that we can do both. I feel like we're in a very tight budget situation. So I appreciate that just that breakdown, because I think to me, over 18 and a half calls an hour at 3 people, no, I need to give more money to the pot for staff incentives. Like this is a huge, and so I think that's why we look at that consolidation of, is this relief? But if it's gonna cost the city more money, we don't know where they're gonna be. We don't know who's gonna fund the equipment and all those needs. And really, in general, a lot of our 911 issues in emergency is due to the fact that we have limited cellular services that need to be upgraded throughout the state. So I feel like consolidation is a great idea in the sense of those pros, but I have had concerns as far as, is it the time and do we have that capacity? And if it falls on the city of Lewiston, I feel like I need to say, we can't take that on. And I think the recent events make us need to take even a farther back step and say, can we tackle this at all? So thank you for this, because these are things that I feel like I've felt, but we meet quarterly and I know everybody has priorities. So this is really the first time we've really got to sit down and talk about the nitty gritty of it. So thank you, Chief Kusick.
And I appreciate that. And even in-house, we have a fourth console right now sitting there. So if we can push, get Manning up, we still have a fourth. And even if we consider expansion, there is another office right in there that we could actually at least add a fifth. Because right now this plan's calling basically for 6 active consoles and 2 for training, so a total of 8. And I appreciate those comments, because I do agree we need to get some support to our dispatchers right now, because they are working a lot and they're working very hard. And like I said, it's very high stressful. You can go from having a funny phone call with a car broken down to having a conversation or getting a 911 where you have a spouse calling in, if their spouse of 50 years is having a heart attack, and that dispatcher now has to start giving them CPR instructions to somebody that's hysterical, to potentially then within 10 minutes, a major fire or an officer-involved shooting. So yes, I appreciate that. And like I said, we do have some options in-house that I think could help mitigate. And with the recruiting purposes, that's been my priority pretty much since getting hired. I've been working with Nikki in HR and also Carol in the PIO's office to start working on a campaign online for officers, but as well as dispatchers. There's been a huge emphasis on communications as well. So we're doing everything we can to try to get the word out there that we're hiring, and we're happy to take great qualified candidates, so.
Councilor Schroeder?
Thank you. I really appreciate your con list. Nobody ever talks about that. I don't think we ever heard too much about the cons, but you're living it and you're giving it to us. And I appreciate it. Your fresh eyes on the ground, and
No, my pleasure. I'm glad it was well received, yes. So, like I said, I gave this a lot of thought, and it wasn't something, like I said, I've read it twice, the full proposal, and I will send that out. I have it actually on my laptop right now. I'll send it to everybody as soon as I sit back down. But, and like I said, just try to give us some good objective thoughts. Because again, that's kind of I think the advantage that I might have coming in is I've only been here 4 months. So there's, I'm not emotionally tied to any particular plan. I'm just looking at it from outside in now inside out.
again, thank you.
Yes.
Councilor Kleber?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Chief, actually, about 6 years ago, when I think Chief Michael Buss would remember that, and the county actually hired a consultant to come out from South Carolina, who had been successful in putting together a consolidated dispatch center and stuff like that. But once we started looking at where he was at, and I can't remember, Chief, but Charleston or something, but it's a city of much larger population, and came in and started, and the same thing ended up happening, was A, the cost, and then B, it kind of degraded into a parochial, who's gonna run it type of battle. And, was the county gonna run it, were we gonna run it, have a board run it, and, those plans went nowhere. So, I don't know, we as a community are quite ready to take that next step. So,
I agree.
I appreciate your honesty on this.
No, I appreciate it. And also, one thing I forgot to mention, I've shared my concerns already with Chief Michael Buss. We've had I know he's been intimately involved in this. He and I have had these discussions, so he knew I had conversations one-on-one with the sheriff, and as in the 911 gentleman, Bill and Dave as well. So this is not going to be a surprise to anybody. Just want to, just have these conversations, and, again, it's not personal to me. These are just my thoughts and my concerns, so.
Councilor Schroeder?
What do you need from us today?
Today, right now, really just, I think it's been spoken, just make sure the support, I'm gonna sit down with, my command team and try to really map out how we can just get the manning and the support in going forward. And then just working with the 911 team as far as, equipment and upgrades. And long-term, I think that's gonna be a discussion for long-term, yeah, that discussion for my plans and thoughts are gonna be for another conversation. But yeah, I think we're starting to move, and as the city grows and develops and matures, that, yeah, we're gonna have to have probably a different conversation about improved facilities and as such. But again, I think that's for another conversation.
Counselor Kleber?
Yeah, just one final comment. I think there is, I mean, we do have a budget line item in your department for equipment upgrades, you know, that covers replacing, you know, radios as we go along and stuff like that. So we do have an equipment upgrade line item, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I don't have the budget yet in front of me, but I know there is general equipment upgrade, correct? Yes, absolutely.
Counselor Ledke?
And just one last thing, I think just to make sure that we get our message heard is that we are not about shutting down a plan, it's about, we really do wanna find a solution, and I think the consensus of that group that meets quarterly is really that we do value the staff that is putting in an immense amount of work, both physically and cognitively, they have to be fatigued, and so, you know, consolidation is different than partnership, and I think that our goal is that we continue to work towards a partnership that becomes successful, and then maybe we, down the road, can look at what those things do. But not having a facility, not having those things in place, I think, you know, COVID slowed a lot of things down, but the conversation and planning might have been the best time to try to figure out, you know, could we test those things? And so I just hope that the message is that we're not looking to just say no, it's what's best and let's prioritize our needs. And I think we've identified that there's definitely some things that would help protect us to not have a loss of service. And I think that's, for me, that's one of my top priorities, is that we don't want to have to not be able to take a call that is very important.
Correct, yeah, and I hope I didn't give the impression that our dispatch center is ready to fail any minute intimately, but yeah, the building's 50 years old, you know, it really is, and the server down in the basement, or the server room that has all the equipment is old stuff, you know, and it's functioning, and Dave and Bill from the 911 center, they do come in and they make sure they keep it up and running, but, you know, there's problems like we had our generator problem, you know, now we found out we were underpowered, so now we're, you know, having to supplement with a generator, you know, which is gonna, you know, that's a cost of the city, and I've got to find a place somewhere in the parking lot to house that, you know, so it's secured and functioning, and, I mean, like I said, everything works, and when things go down, I have, you know, an incredible staff that actually gets things done immediately. And back to your comments, I appreciated about the partnerships, yes. Even speaking with all the stakeholders, of the other law enforcement stakeholders, and Chief Michael, it is about partnerships, you know, and I'm very open to partnerships, and that's what I believe in, because we have to do what's right for the entire county, really, the city and the county, because that's our constituents, that's who we're here to serve. So, you know, what that model looks forward, you know, going forward, we'll land on something, we'll get there.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Michael Buss, did you have some closing comments to share with us, please?
And I do appreciate Chief taking a look at this. One of the things knowing kind of direction from council will help us. One of the things Chief and I talked briefly about is making sure that we put into writing some of the needs. There are many times at the fire department, not in the current administration or even recent, but in my 31 years, we were just told what to do and we had no say about our dispatching services. We now have a great relationship, but Chief and I were talking to capture that, put it in writing, because personnel and leadership will change, as we've seen over my career, and we want to make sure that as we do this, we stay there. The last part is looking at truly identifying what does it cost for our dispatch center to dispatch police or fire and EMS. And the reason for that is when we get into the ground emergency medical transport, which is our Medicaid supplemental program in the state of Idaho, which is going into the state plan amendment submittal next month, which means from January 1 on, we get to capture our expenses. A part of our expenses that is allocated is dispatch, but currently I have no cost because I don't pay for anything. Even though there is a cost to the city, it's not allocated out for what portion of that is for fire and EMS. We would like to capture that because that cost then goes into our cost allocation, and that's how they based our cost per call, and then we get a resubmittal. We've participated in the state of Washington. Obviously, In Washington, I don't have to pay for dispatch. The fire district does for us, but we don't have to pay anything over there, so I can't include that cost. But I look at it is, we talk about property tax reform, we talk about taking the burden off our property taxpayers. The GMT will do that, and if we can grab tens of thousands of dollars of extra funding by capturing that cost, I think that's something that we should focus on trying to break out prior to the start of the next fiscal year during the budget process. I'm saying this now because I will not be here. I will build the fire department budget prior to my departure, but when it comes in front of you in June, I will not be here. I will be a citizen, no longer your fire chief. And so I'm trying to get some steps pointed out prior to my departure. I will obviously work with my team. I'd work with Chief Kuzik's team to make sure, can we get close to that? I think it would be beneficial. That's just my recommendation. Do as you may, but I will soon just be a property taxpayer, the citizen of Lewiston, and I will want you to do everything to protect mine. And that's just always been my approach as your fire chief, is we try to find ways to take that burden off. To me, is I don't want us to leave money on the table. If we can't, this is one option that we have available.
Councilor Lidke?
So as of January 1, month and whatever days ago, when you talk about we need to identify cost allocation, is that something that we wait until the next budget, or do we need to reopen and create work?
No, we cannot capture it now because our budget is set, so we won't be able to go through that. But that's only 9 months of that fiscal year. We need to look at the future moving forward. And yes, so for these, from January through October, we would not be able to capture that no matter what we do. But for the cost reporting for that next fiscal year, we would be able to grab that. And I think, once again, just kind of strategically looking ahead, I think it's going to benefit us in the long run. And that's just one of the, plus that does somewhat take a little burden because of what the police department has done for many years for police and fire and law enforcement is amazing, but their burden and the entire cost of what they do, a lot of it's us. I mean, a lot of the 911 phone calls are sick and hurt people and houses on fire, and so we do create that, and I think it would just be nice to know what that burden is to Chief Kuzik's budget. And once again, it's like an intergovernmental, it's like our IT, we all chip in, but this would be the fire department would have to have that expense, and then the revenue would show up in their side, and it would be a good benefit to us all. All I have.
Or Chief, I'm gonna give it 1 second, see if we get anyone tuning in from outside, otherwise I'll let you go. I think we're good to
Mr.
go.
Mayor?
Oh, Councilor Forsman.
Sorry, I missed earlier discussion when Chief Kuzik was up. But I appreciate, it sounded like he talked to staff about this as well, about that 911 dispatch system. So I appreciate that he went and talked to his team to see if this would be something that they feel would be beneficial. So I just want to commend that. And sounds like there's a lot more that needs to be looked at as far as if this is a good move or not.
Thank you, Councilor. Thank you, Chief. Importance today. Councilors, next up on the agenda is item 5C, franchise fees, and this is the discussion that I will lead. Mike Tatko's here from Avista, so welcome, Mike. It's good to have you here. As we talk about something that's been talked about before at the City of Lewiston, and that is to consider a proposal to increase our franchise fee. And as you know, franchise fees are something that's allowed under Idaho statute. And today we have a 1% franchise fee that Avista collects for the City of Lewiston, I think 1% on gas and electric. And those monies are sent back to the city, and it helps us pay for streets maintenance / maybe some construction activities within the city. And it's meant to do that is to help offset some of these costs, because in lieu of that, Avista would have to get like encroachment permits or right-of-way permits and things like that. So one way or the other, Vista would pay for the privilege of being able to operate within our streets, our rights of way to hang lines, above the roads, pipes on the ground, these kind of things to service their customers. And so in exchange for that, they collect a 1% franchise fee on gross revenues, or if you have your monthly utility bill, it shows up as a percentage, 1% of your bill that they would collect and remit those back to the city, and then those monies are dedicated to the city. What I'm asking you to look at today, and the discussion I'd like to have, is to talk about the possibility of raising that franchise fee from 1% to 3%. And the purpose for that is really twofold. One is to raise some much-needed revenue for streets maintenance and repairs / maybe construction throughout the city. But in addition to that, it's going to have the added benefit of lessening the burden on the property taxes. So if we can capture some of these revenues from our franchise fees and dedicate it to streets maintenance, then it's possible that we wouldn't have such a demand on the street levy within our general fund. So that's really how simple this is. Our task would be to go out and convince the public that this is good for them and that it's good for the city. I would maintain that it is a good thing for the city. They may not feel that way because they feel it's, and it is, an increase in the fees that they pay, the taxes that they pay. But the only other choice that we have is to look at other revenue sources, such as property taxes, to fund our streets and roads. And if you look at the levy amount over the last 10 years, I just looked at it that way. We went from approximately 1.4 million to around 3.2 million over the last 10 years. And that's from 2012 to 2021 in levy dollars. And so that's well over 200% increase in property taxes that we dedicate to our streets. If we look at just the franchise fee, we've collected, last year we collected in calendar year 2022, $383,000 in franchise fees. Back in 2011, it was $348,000. And so it's been approximately 6% increase. And so it's been much flatter than property taxes. And so it would appear to me that there might be some capacity within our franchise fees where everyone pays it, not just property owners. So if you're a renter, if you're a church, if you're a government agency like the state of Idaho or the city of Lewiston, you pay into that. And so it's a much broader base that pays into our road program. Essentially those who are using it are paying for it, not just placing that on the shoulders of the property owners, residential and commercial. So we attempted this to raise this fee in the past. I think 2017, if I remember right, was the last time it was on the ballot, and it failed. Then I think again in 19, council looked at it and then pulled it. They did not run with that. But just by way of comparison, if you look across the state, most cities have the minimum 1%. I have some old information here, so I can't attest to how accurate it is. But, when this was looked at previously, some cities that were grandfathered in have 5% on the gas and the electric. Others might split it. For example, here's an example of Nampa that had 3% on gas, nothing on electric. So the city can decide how they want to do that. In the city of Lewiston, we have 1% gas, 1% electric, is what I believe, yeah. And so, and that generates about $380,000 a year. So with that, our councilors, I'd throw that up for discussion. And depending on your direction, your guidance, it would be my intention to bring something back to you. You have a copy of some draft language here. This isn't necessarily what we can put on a general election ballot, but we're trying to thread that needle to give as much information as we can without violating the rules of law in the process. So we're going to continue to work on that with the Attorney General, or our legal office and our public information officer, see if we can't find the sweet spot on this language, but to make it informative when folks go to the ballot. But in the meantime, we would go to the public and bring this idea to this, get them to talk about it. Maybe do some focus group work where we can ask folks, what does this tell them? How do they read these types of information? And if we can get it into the King's language, the ballot initiative. So this would be for the May election. And if all goes well, the school district in March, then we might be the only question on the ballot in May. And if so, we'd have some expenses to pay for. Or we could choose to run this in November. November's going to be a full ballot because we'll be looking at some other things in the city, potentially our stormwater fee and things like that. So, councilors, with that, I just throw it up for any thoughts or ideas or direction you might have on this.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Forsman?
So I know that when I first got on council, this kind of discussion was talked about for kind of finding different ways to provide more of a budget for the roads and for infrastructure. Or is the concern from citizens could be where they would see a cost increase might be their energy bill itself, because obviously they wouldn't see that percentage unless they raise the energy bill on their homes. Unless I'm misunderstanding that. I just want to make sure I understand exactly how this works.
It would be, it functions like a sales tax. So yes, it would show up on the utility bill. So if your utility bill is $100, you pay $1 today. If this passed, you'd pay $3. So that would be the difference from 1% to 3%.
Okay, follow-up question. So I'm curious as for maybe making this seem more appealing. It seems like it might save more money for all involved if we pulled this way versus pulling from property taxes, because property taxes, like you said, would only be homeowners, which would have to probably make maybe a pretty good increase in order to make a dent to give us more of a budget to work with, versus if we did the franchise fee, you would have more paying into it, which mean we could pull less. Is that a good way of thinking of that?
Well, I think in theory and maybe practice too, the idea is to try to have an equitable, sustainable revenue source for our roads. And by having everybody who uses the roads pay into the system, that appears to be a more equitable solution. And it spreads that burden out over a broader base. So if you have, let's say, 1,000 utility customers and you have 100 property owners, 1,000 utility customers would pay into that fund versus 100 property owners. Now, the property owners can certainly pass those costs on either through increased rents or higher products, food or whatever they may sell to you. But this just seems to be, in my opinion, a better way to do it. It's really like a consumption tax. And so even as a consumer, you could decide, to turn the heat down and that you pay less utilities, but you also pay less of a franchise fee, although it's a very small amount in comparison to the bill, the entire bill.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Councilor Kleberg?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And, Mr. Tadco is here. We have talked about this in the past, so we have 1% right now. There's nothing saying we have to go to 3%. We could certainly go to 2%. And I think, at your pleasure, we could have Mr. Tadco explain what a 2% would do. Because I don't think that needs to go to the ballot.
Well, I think I can answer that question. Last year, 2022, we took in $383,000 in franchise fees from Avista Corporation.
Okay.
So last year, if it was 2%, it'd be double that amount, so $760,000.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But
I'm just throwing that out there as a thought.
so the thought is, or the question is, I'm speaking loud so folks can.
Oh, I'm sorry. The question is, and I think we're informed by Avista that if we're gonna go for 3%, then it had to be put to a vote of the public. You could certainly, I don't think we have to do that if we decided to up it to 2%.
So the way the statute works is if you want to go above 1%, you can do 2% or you can do 3%. And Avista Corporation, in its sole discretion, could raise it to 2% or 3%, and they have chosen not to do that. So instead, it would be up to the voters of this municipality, this district, to say, yes, we would like to have that fee go up. And my understanding is that Avista would not be in opposition to that. They would just collect those monies and remit those back to the city the way they do today with the 1%.
Yeah.
It's revenue neutral for them.
Yes.
Councilor Spickelmeyer?
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's a good idea, but I think that the, public needs to be educated on the property taxes first. Because the general public right now thinks that the last increase we had in property taxes means the city has a whole bunch of money. And once you try to explain to them that the city doesn't have any more, it's, more driven by the state, I think more education to the public before this comes out, might go a lot smoother. Because they'd say, well, what are you doing with all the money I already gave you? We aren't getting our streets fixed, nothing's getting done, but we doubled or 60% increase in our property taxes.
Well, point well taken, Counselor, and I guess I would extend that challenge to all the council members also to get out and visit with the public and let them know that they can certainly do that. If they want to fund government services from property taxes, we can continue to do that. That's fair, that's what we do. But also, when we look at the cost of maintaining these roads, they're going up. And they're gonna continue to go up. And so we have a couple of choices. You can pay for this through revenue sources such as property taxes, or you can pay for them through revenue sources that are not property taxes. And this would give them an opportunity to decide how they would like to be taxed, in order to pay for these services. So it's a big job ahead, no doubt about it. And the May deadline creates an extra challenge because it's short. It doesn't leave a lot of time to get the word out. Councilor Schroeder?
Thank you. Back in 17, when I was running for council, it was the most difficult thought transfer to get people to understand this. And I don't know how to make it simpler. I think we all need to be educated ourselves before this all happens. But it really is a very good tool to use. And you're right, it's spreading out the cost to all the users, not just the homeowners. And we need to find ways that it spreads out the cost to everyone all the users instead of, increasing property taxes. So I'm in support of it. I think it's a great option for the needs that we have in our community to upgrade roads and whatever else comes around that we can apply that for. And I appreciate Avista being willing to take that and be the pass-through for us. And I think the education part is the most difficult, but it really is simple. All the users pay for it if it's through the franchise fees, whereas otherwise it just falls on the homeowners.
It is a form of property tax relief when you think about budgets. If budgets are not increasing and you can move those costs over to a consumption fee, if you will, a user fee, and take that off the property taxes, and it provides relief, where a lot of homeowners are looking for relief today. So, but it is a lot of information that has to go out. Councilor Lickey.
I'm in full support for this, and I didn't mean to guffaw at your statement, but I think property tax is something that should drive our residents to support this, because when you have this more equitable spread, it's going to users. When we say users, that's not just homeowners, that's churches, other nonprofits, like my employer. That's the Port of Lewiston, that's SEL, that's, there's some folks that are they are gonna have maybe not the same rate as a homeowner, but where we have valuation of residential rising at this rate and non-residential, businesses already got their break. And this is an avenue for us. And in my mind, we may get pushback from businesses, but just to do some quick math, at home my bill's about $118. So I pay just over $1 right now. As a business, our power bill is about $2,300, so I'm paying $23. So you triple that, you're up to $69 for a business. That, for small businesses, hopefully their power bill, they need to probably, if their power bill is $2,300. But for those that have a business like that, that to me drives my budget. Then how do I address that? Because I know that cost is coming. Well, I want to raise my revenue, and I can do that because I have a supply and demand situation through, that part of the business. But when I hear from our residents, especially our 65 and olders that are living on, Social Security and maybe a pension, they don't get to go out and make more money. So we need to think about what that does. So at just over $1, that gets it to $3. But the overall value of that is going from less than $400,000 to over $1.1 million that we could bring in as revenue. That is immediate tax relief that we could give. And so I am in huge favor, and I am more than willing and committed to educate the best that I can and to counteract any pushback that we get from governmental agencies and businesses. I think the businesses will be on board. I know that, some of us have $5,000 power bills as businesses. You have supply and demand, you have market changes, you have the adjustability. Our elderly residents, and I think it was reported recently in the paper, we have like the largest population. We need to start making decisions that benefit them, and this will. And so 100%, give me my pamphlets, I'll start knocking on doors.
And I think on the heels of this last year where we saw record increases in residential valuations in the state of Idaho, this, in my opinion, is a proactive approach to trying to tackle these problems head on and not waiting until we get back through that cycle again. I don't think we can afford to do that. So I know it's going to be hard for some folks to understand or maybe hard for them to accept or trust, that we have their best interests in mind. But I think we can show them that, in fact, it's a valid form, it's a good form of property tax relief moving forward. And then it's going to be up to this council then to exercise some fiscal restraint, and honor that commitment that we made to them. But it spreads that burden out in a small way. It starts to lower that total dollars, absolute dollars that are needed, and it puts it onto a broader, base of users to help pay for these roads. So, down the road, if we're able to take these monies and then leverage those for other streets, opportunities that the Public Works Department is going to come across down the road, I think we'll be better positioned and ready to move on them today instead of waiting 10 or 15 or 20 years to have to work on some of these projects. So. Okay, before we get off that, I just want to extend a courtesy, Mike, if we said anything that was incorrect or misrepresented of Vista Corporation, you are welcome to take the stand and let us know. Otherwise, we'll just wave to you.
Just one quick thing.
Please introduce yourself for the record. Thank you.
Mike Tatko, Vista 803 Main in Lewiston. And you kind of addressed it. If you're a city and you don't have a franchise fee, you can go from 0 to 1 with just a vote of the city council. And this is exactly what the city of Lewiston did back in the day. And from 1 to either 2 or 3, the utility does have the ability to award that, but we have an internal policy, which we've had for probably 11 years, that says we'd rather leave it up to the citizens of a city to make that decision instead of us. So, and you indicated that correctly. The only other thing I would say is, I know the ballot language is really hard because you don't have very much room, and your draft language is a lot. I've seen these fail, and they fail because the ballot language isn't good. The people just think it's just, where's my money gonna go? So as specific as you can get as to where you're gonna use the funds, should this pass, you're gonna have a lot better chance. Other than that, you were spot on everything you said, so.
So, Mike, if I can ask you a question, so that you can also maybe defend a statement that I made, but it's my understanding that if this is not going to push back on the city of Lewiston, if we decide to do that, and along that line.
Yeah, we neither support nor oppose. We act as the pass-through agency, as you know. There is, and you mentioned it, it's on, this is my bill right here, and it says at the very bottom of both my electricity and my gas, it says 1%. And so, people see that, and people see an increase, and if it's, my bill's similar to Hannah, Councilor Licky's, it's $1, and it would be $3. Some people's is gonna be a lot more. So we will educate our customer service representatives who will take the calls, either before, if they see it in the media, or if they see a pamphlet, or if they're aware of it, or if it passes. We will educate, but we do not take sides either way.
Thank you, Mike. So I think the message that I'm hearing too is that I have to do a very good job of communicating with Vista Corporation, let them know we're on first, second, or third base, and so maybe the counselors too, so that we can communicate with them. My understanding is that we will, assuming we get down this road, we'll bring this to council on February 27th is when we would bring it before you for consideration of the official ballot language. And then a week later, we would submit it to the county. So that's the timeline for a May election cycle. So that's kind of where things are at right now, but we have some time to see if we can get across the finish line. Councilor Lickey?
Thank you for that comment about gas and electric. Is that something that we need to identify? Because that is one thing that I would like to see, is that we include both, because I've heard that you do one or the other. And I think leaving one out, we lose some equitability. So I think it needs to be across borders. So is that something that we should identify in the ballot?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Lickey, yeah, it needs to say electricity and natural gas. And I know that takes up a little bit more space by including both, but it does need to specify, because we are, in some cities, we only provide one or the other. And so you wouldn't have to, but in this particular city where we provide both, you would have to identify both. Thank you. And I'm available between now and then, or whenever, if anyone needs to ask me about anything.
Mike, before you get away, Councilor Forsman, did you have any questions for Mr. Tacko?
No, I don't believe so. I think just as we said, just making sure that people really understand what this means, so that they're well educated and they feel like that when they go to vote, that they really understand what they're voting for. So, and it sounds like that's already happening a lot. Even seeing citizens kind of realize that the city didn't raise the property taxes, and that wasn't on us this year. So more and more, I think that we're getting better with our transparency, and I just appreciate all the hard work.
Thank you, Councilor. Thank you, Mike, for being here today with us, for joining us. Okay, councilors, next up, Roman numeral 6, unfinished and new business, city councilor comments. Comments shall not be related to an item currently before the council or an item that may come before the council in the foreseeable future. It shall be limited to comments, not discussion. Any council comments today? Okay, I'll jump down to boards and commissions. Any updates there? Councilor Schroeder.
Historic Preservation Commission is, I think, in need of new people. And so we would appreciate anyone who is interested in that to come forward and fill out an application for that. And I know it's definitely one, but it's possibly two, because there's somebody that may be out for a long period of time. We're not sure on that yet. So we'd like any and all people who are interested in the historic part of our city where we live to come and participate with that.
In your comments, I'll add to that. We actually have some interest now in our Public Works Advisory Commission, and so we're working to put that together. We have at least one very good candidate that might be interested in helping us try to, two very good candidates that are going to help us in that area. So I'm very excited about that. Then I want to say thank you to Ms. Carolyn Eads, our friend who brings us usually brownies in milk. Today brought what appears to be a carrot cake. I don't have my glass. It's a carrot cake with frosting on it. There is one piece left back there. It's rather large, but please help yourself to it. It is very good. And Carolyn, if you're listening, thank you for your concern. I know I have my glasses on here today, but she's just very grateful for our service and extends her prayers to us and well wishes. So Carolyn, thank you for paying attention and recognizing the service of your city council. Appreciate that very much. Councilors, with that, I think advisory board and commission appointments, we don't have any today. Agenda topics for a future meeting. Councilor Lidkey?
I have a couple. One, I would like to hear, and I'm sure Director Barker gets tired of me making requests of him, but I would like to hear if we've made any movement of, in regards to a youth advisory commission. While I'm not for growing government of any kind, I would like to hear the voice of our youth. And so if we could get that on as what steps need to be taken or what steps have, just updates so we can make maybe some decisions on how to get that going and get young people involved. I have one other, I don't know if we need to vote on that or.
Councilor, you could make a motion, put that on a future agenda, or just submit it for a topic, and Clerk Brocky will write that down, and I can add it to a future work session for discussion. I know that Mr. Barker has shared some information with me, and I'm happy to provide that to you also. So whatever the sense of urgency is on that.
Not really. I would like to see it happen. And then also, I appreciated the personnel manual update, and I recently asked for some job descriptions. I would like to see where we're at with getting those updated to reflect the new form of government. Currently do not, from what was sent to me, so.
Do that. I can get those prepared and ready for you. Thank you. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion to adjourn moved by Councilor Kleber, second by Councilor Schroeder. Is there discussion? Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I'll take that as an aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.